Boker Tov, guys. It's Erev Yom Kippur today. Uh, just a quick review on a couple of things that we're going to learn today. Bezrat Hashem. The first one, first Erev Yom Kippur, a couple of things. We're going to go through a couple of sigulot that you guys can do. Some for today, some you do in a tefillah tomorrow. Erev Yom Kippur, I try to make like an itemized list every year so that I can check off things. What I put on my list, obviously to do kaparot. Kaparot could be done with money or with chicken, depending on the custom. The Shulchan Aruch says not to do it with chickens, just as a side note, but there's a whole like halachic discussion on that. Review the machzor. What I mean is like take 10 minutes before the holiday, 15 minutes, just like skim the machzor. It makes it a lot easier than when you go into the holiday and you're completely, it's old. And I also always use an English machzor. I know Hebrew almost fluently, which means I can read the Tanakh and explain 90% of the words by learning and checking. I still use an English machzor because there's a huge difference when you're praying and actually understand the English, the songs, or whatever language you speak, Spanish or whatever. But it's important. Have a machzor that has definitions, has explanations. The tefillah is very different. I remember the first year that we were doing the Avodah Musaf. What I did that one year is I took like 4 books, all explaining the Avodah of Yom Kippur of the Kohen, illustrations, everything. I studied it all. I brought them to the Avodah. So during the Avodah, I had like 4 books open in front of me, the illustrations, everything. And I followed along as if I was living in the second Beit HaMikdash and like literally looking at every photo and everything. It changed my whole entire tefillah. I used to just read it with him and I was just, whatever, going along, reading words. Then it became a completely different tefillah where I'm in it and I'm kind of envisioning as if I'm sitting in the second Beit HaMikdash, what the Kohen's doing, how he's dressed, how he's going to the mikveh, he's coming out, he's putting on the gold garments, the white garments, he's switching up. It changes everything. And the tefillah is avodah shebalev. You have to feel it. If you're just doing it with your mouth and your mind and you're not feeling it, it's not avodah shebalev. Obviously that, of course, going to the mikveh. I know we live in Surfside, but I would highly recommend not going to the ocean, only because what's the purpose of having an issue of sheminat enayim, of seeing improperly dressed women going there? So I'd recommend you go to the Chabad local mikveh. It's better. I don't think there'd be a mitzvah to go into an ocean when it's mixed, especially in a hot day today. Like today, it wouldn't be. I don't think it's intelligent. You'd be over on sheminat enayim. So. I know some people do it. There are some beaches you can go down, like in the 70s, which is private. Maybe that's okay, but like we live in Surfside. I think a person has to assume that. And then the last thing is I try to pay off any debts that I have to either people or to the shuls right before the holiday. I think it's a good idea. Clean up the debt. We learned the halacha the other day from Rabbi Toledano, Hamav Yosef Toledano, how paying debts back before Yom Kippur is great, even though if you have till Sukkot, till the regel, it'd be a good thing. So there's 2 sigulot that we're going to quickly discuss today. The first sigula is sigula lechaparat avonot. It's a sigula, if you do it, it's a kapara for all your avonot. Hashem will forgive you for avonot. It's actually an interesting one. It's brought down. First, we're reading from Silichot Kol Tzion. That is Hacham Ben Zion Musafi's Silichot book. The source of this sigula is Leshon Chachamim Chelek Bet Siman Chet. So that's the source. Always when we teach sigulot, we're always going to bring in the source. And if we don't have a source, we'll teach it and tell you there's no source. The reason for this is that sigulot have to be followed according to the text. Because just like a person wants to charge his phone, plugging into an outlet, if he plugs it in 40%, it's not charging his phone, even if it looks like it's being charged. Or if the USB-C is not connected into the AC adapter, and it looks like it is, and everyone sees like it is, but it's not charging. And suddenly he takes his phone doesn't have any battery on it. So Sigula has to be followed to it. So the Sigula is as follows. The Sigula says, Beyom Shemona Betishri or Betish'abo. So on the 8th or 9th day of Tishri, today is the 9th. It's Erev Yom Kippur, or yesterday was Shabbat, the 8th. So obviously today was the only day. Ta'aseh Sigula zo. Do the Sigula Utchila Techtov Devrim Elu Al Niyan Kazen Nosach. He says, okay, take a piece of paper and write down. If you wanted the entire text of this Sigula will be on shul.com under publications. You'll see it there under the Sigula for Yom Kippur. So he says, take a piece of paper and write as follows: Yimachu, 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 Kol Shitre Chavotenu. Yimachu, 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 Chataenu, Va'avonotenu, Ufsha'enu, Yitbatelu, 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 Kol HaMastinin, V'HaMekatrigim, Shena'asu, Mechataenu, Va'avonotenu, Ufsha'enu. Yiyu Chulam Betelim, Umvutalim, Betelim, Umvutalim, Betelim, Umvutalim, Yevoshu, V'Yikallemu, Kol HaNecherim Banu, Yiyu Che'ain, V'Yovedu, Anshe Rivenu. יהיו כעין וכאפס אנשי מלחמתנו. יהון שביתין ושביקין, לה שרירין ולה קיימין, יסתלקו ויובדו כל אויבינו בשונאינו, תפול עליהם אימתה בפחד, בגדול זרעך ידמו כאבן ידמו זרעך בגדול הפחד, אימתה עליהם תפול. You write that down. Obviously I said it fast, you can do it slowly, you can look at the paper. And then after you write it down on a small piece of paper, when you do it, write it on a very, very small piece of paper. Why? Because after you do the segula, you got to take a rock. Take a rock like this, and you wrap the paper around the rock. The intention is that the rock is going to sink the paper. We'll see right now. He says, after you write everything on the paper, write it with your hand on a paper, not a computer. Don't make a photocopy and do this. The segula is write it with your hand, ink on a paper, or even a pencil on a paper. Okay, he says here go to an ocean or a big river. Okay? Not just a body of water. The segula is a yam or a nahar gadol. So we live next to the ocean. There's also rivers here in Miami. It's easy. If you live in Brooklyn or in Deal, New Jersey, Brooklyn, you go to Atlantic Ocean, Deal, Atlantic Ocean, no problem. Also, try to go to a place that is not by the shore, as we'll see now, because we want this to sink to the bottom of the depth. So go to somewhere where you know the depth is deep. A lot of the waters here in Miami are 6, 7, 8 feet. They look deep, but they're not. So go. Okay, he says, go telech etzel hayam or etzel nahar gadol, ocean or a river, a big river. Chidekel or perat or gichon chayotze behem. Okay, so he's mentioning here the Iraqi rivers, the Chidekel, the Prat or Gichon. As a side note, the Euphrates River is drying up. That's a different discussion. So I don't know if some of these rivers are not even rivers anymore. So it's interesting. With Tikrasham, et kol hadevarim ha'eleh ketuvim al haniyar haniskar. Okay, so after you write it, and while you have a stone, before you tie the paper with the stone, you're going to take what you wrote and you're going to read it by the body of water. Okay, so you can actually read this what you just typed up. Read it quietly. So you get to the body of water and you read this quietly. Okay. When you finish reading everything quietly, the things that you wrote on the paper with your handwriting, then tie the paper to the rock. You can tie it with like a rubber band. You don't have a rubber band, you could do like one of those scrunchies that your wife might have, like something like that. So you can tie it so it doesn't get disconnected from it. Tashlichehu el toch hayam, and throw it to the depth of the ocean, or el toch nahar, or inside of the river. With tizahed hashlicho b'makom ha'emek, and be careful to put it somewhere that has a depth. I don't know what depth means, but I'm going to assume depth means probably the height of a person, because that would be deep. I mean, if someone stood in the water and he was above the water, it's not deep. But if he gets in the water and he's got to swim to be above, I would say that is what he would call deep. You wouldn't call a 4-foot pool deep. You'd probably call a 10-foot pool deep or something like that. So he says a couple of things. You got to write it by hand on paper. You got to read it quietly by the body of water. You tie it to the stone, and then you throw it into the water in a place that's deep. That's the sigula. That's according to the text that he's written. That's exactly how you're supposed to do it. If you knock off a couple of these things, I don't know if it works because you're changing the sigula. Then after he throws it in, you say the following: Kacha yishlechu v'yishtakeu b'msulot yam kol ha'mekatregim v'hamastinin yipulu v'lo yakumu yipulu v'lo yakumu yipulu v'lo yakumu tipol alehem emata v'fachad b'gdol zarachai demu ka'aven yidemu zarachai b'gdol v'fachad emata alehem tipol hema קראו ונפלו ואנחנו קמנו ונתדות אדוני יושיע המלך יעננו וימכרנו יהיו לרצון בני פי ויגון דביר פרח עיניים צורי וגואלי. That's it. You say that. That's after you throw it inside. You read that. Now that you can just read regularly. You don't have to read it quietly. It didn't say anything about that quietly. That's a segula. If you do that, as a segula to forgive your avonot. Obviously, when you're doing it, you're not just doing it for the segula alone. You have to put some feeling into it. That is the first segula.